Welcome to Been There, Learned That. This is the podcast for leaders devoted to Jesus, their families, and the pursuit of meaningful work. As a life and leadership coach with decades of experience in church, nonprofit, and corporate settings, I am passionate about supporting others. Join me right here every week to gain clarity, confidence, and sustainable strategies to help you break free from behavior patterns that are hindering your leadership. Imagine having authentic energy for your life. It is entirely possible, and it all starts right here. Let's get started. Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to Been There, Learned That. I'm your host, Dana Byers, and today we are tackling a topic that every leader, no matter how experienced, faces at some point in time. And that is the experience of rejection. So whether it's a declined opportunity, a critical comment that's made to you, or maybe a relationship that didn't go as planned, rejection can be incredibly uncomfortable. It can even be painful, right? But what if we could shift our perspective on rejection and see it as part of our growth instead of something to fear? Well, in today's episode, we're going to explore what rejection truly is. We'll explore how to identify and address the fears that rejection might be stirring up in you. And then we're also going to explore some practical strategies to overcome that fear of rejection so that you can step boldly toward your goals. All right, let's dive in. Well, first, what is rejection? Let's start by defining rejection. At its core, rejection is an unmet expectation or a decision that goes against our desires, goes against what we really wanted, or it goes against the goals that we had in mind. Rejection can feel personal, but often it's not. It's often just a mismatch between what we had hoped would happen and what actually happened. So for leaders, rejection could look like, a declined promotion, hearing a no from a potential client or a partner, your team members pushing back against your ideas, or even criticism from someone you respect. That might be some rejection that's familiar to you. I know it is to me. So what makes rejection so challenging is actually the emotional weight that you and I assign to it. Rejection can feel like a judgment of our worth or our value as a person. Rejection can feel like a confirmation of our own insecurities that already exist. And rejection can also feel like a setback or a major setback on the path to our goals. But here's the truth. Rejection is not a reflection of your intrinsic value. It is simply feedback about the situation, not about who you are as a person or a leader or a mom or a husband or a sibling, or any other roles that you play. So let's dig a little bit deeper into why rejection can feel so uncomfortable. And often it's because when we experience rejection, it's because it's touching on our deepest fears. Let's admit that. Think of the times that might seem like the biggest moments of rejection in your life. I can almost guarantee you those experiences, maybe the worst one that comes to mind, in fact, probably touches on one of your deepest fears. Now, we all have our deepest fears. No judgment for whatever they are. They're there for a reason. But I want you to ask yourself, what is my biggest fear about rejection? Now, I can tell you through having a lot of conversations about rejection with friends, loved ones, clients, myself, I've even been coached on it. Some of the biggest fears about rejection involve a fear of failure, involves a fear of being embarrassed or judged by other people, or even being misunderstood. And also we might be facing a fear of actually being unworthy or being unloved. And then you have to ask yourself, what does rejection mean to me? When I feel rejected, do I see it as proof that I'm not actually good enough? Or do I view rejection as a natural part of growth and learning? So I'm curious, when you're rejected, what do you tell yourself? Because that inner dialogue that you experience is key. If your self-talk is negative, if it's saying things like, I knew I couldn't do it, I knew I wasn't capable, or this always happened to me, well, it's time to reframe those thoughts. And my eyebrows are raised. I'm being as stern as I can with you right now. It's so important for you to capture those thoughts and to reframe them, because I don't want you letting these thoughts run your life. And I really would love to encourage you over the next few minutes as we're talking today, or as you're listening to me today, to really consider what your inner dialogue is when something happens that you experience as very negative, when you feel rejected. So the fear of rejection doesn't have to hold you back. That's what I'm here to tell you. And here are some practical strategies to overcome it and to move toward your goals. Now notice, I didn't say you won't feel rejected. You're going to have to move through that experience. But moving through that experience of rejection is going to help you move toward your goals. The things you want to happen are on the other side of your experience of rejection. So I'm going to walk you through that a bit today. One, you can reframe rejection as redirection. Now, you're not lying to yourself. You're not asking yourself to admit that there wasn't a sense of rejection there, but it may not be that big of a deal. I've made offers to people to coach them and they say no. They're just redirecting me, letting me know they're not interested. It could be a variety of reasons. Usually it's not because they hate me as a person or they think I'm a bad coach. There's usually plenty of other things behind the scenes that may or may not be my business. They may tell me, they may not, but it's not really my business. I'm just redirected to focus somewhere else when that happens. So instead of seeing rejection as a failure, you could view it as feedback or guidance. Someone's response to you is letting you know to head a different way. And you can ask yourself, what can I learn from this? You can ask yourself, how can I adjust for the next opportunity? Now, I don't want to indicate you have to adjust. I was coaching someone recently who said something didn't go very well. He felt rejected. And I said, if you had the opportunity again, would you have said anything differently? And he said, nope, I really wouldn't have. And I said, well, I love that. You don't actually have to adjust your approach. You just connected with a person where there wasn't a match for what you were offering and what they're looking for. So that's really his biggest takeaway, what he learned from that. So you're going to reframe rejection as redirection. And two, you can detach from the outcome. So focus on the effort that you're putting in rather than the result. You and I know this, but I'm going to remind us, we can't control that outcome. And we burn a lot of emotional, physical, spiritual, and mental energy when we try to control that result, when we try to control that outcome. But you can focus on your effort. One of the biggest experiences in my life of that is parenting, you guys. I finally learned, a little too late for my own preferences, but I finally really developed the habit of focusing on being intentional in my effort and not on the outcome. That gave me so much enjoyment in my role as a mom while my kids were under my roof, and now, even if they're not under my roof, to just appreciate the relationship and not have an expected result in who they are or who I am or exactly how we relate to each other every time we connect, okay? We become detached from the outcomes so that we experience rejection less. And then we also can celebrate the fact that we tried, whether or not we succeeded. You've heard me say a lot on this podcast, if you've listened to other episodes, that a lot of times my goal is to make sure that my effort gets me to a point where I don't lose sleep at night. Now, that doesn't mean I burn myself out, but I know I did the things I felt were important. I stepped into something with an intent to serve someone, even if they maybe misinterpreted it. I want you and me to be able to celebrate the fact that we tried, that we made that offer, that we went for that job, that we said the difficult thing in the conversation, whether or not we succeeded or whether or not it went the way we wanted it to, okay? Now, another way we can overcome this fear of rejection is to practice resilience through exposure. Okay, so you can intentionally put yourself in situations where rejection is entirely possible. And you might be saying, Dana, that's crazy. Is it? Because I think every day you and I wake up, we're actually putting ourselves in situations where rejection is possible. We just may not anticipate it. So if you're going to do this intentionally, you could start small. You could ask for a discount at a store. You could pitch an idea to a colleague at work. You could volunteer for a new challenge that you aren't sure you're going to be chosen for, or you're not sure you're going to be able to complete that challenge. And here's why. The more you face rejection, the less power it has over you. I just had a call with this amazing young business leader, and he said to me, I've had so much rejection lately, but I'm building my resilience, my resilience in these kinds of scenarios I've been engaging in. And I was like, oh, I love hearing that. If you're facing rejection in an appropriate way, exposing yourself to it where it's appropriate at the right time and not burning yourself out on it, you're going to discover it has less power over you and your resilience muscles will grow. Years ago, I think it was 2012, I had this ministry job at a church that I absolutely loved, and people would contribute money to the ministry. And so my leader asked us to make giver calls, to make phone calls to these people who had contributed financially to the ministry, and to just say, hey, this is Dana from so-and-so. Thank you so much for giving this week. Just wanted to reach out and see if there's any way I can pray for you. That's exactly what I would say. And do you know, out of the first maybe 10 phone calls, I think I made about 10 calls a week. Out of the first 10 phone calls, a couple of those people had negative responses to me. Now, I have no business keeping this in my memory. I don't know why my memory's held on to this, because this was, 12 years ago now, 12, 13 years ago. But one of the first people I talked to said, I'm at a gas station right now. Why are you calling me? No, I don't want you to pray for me. And the next, I don't know if it was the next person or two people after that, just maybe a couple calls later, the other person said, don't ever call me again, and I won't be giving to your ministry again. Like, basically, don't bother me. And I was so shocked because I just kind of thought, oh, this will be a fun conversation. At the very least, I'll get to pray for them or just show my appreciation, and happened to meet them in a moment where I felt rejected by their responses. So here's what I did. I started a little tally page on my desk. And when I sat down to do those calls to our givers, I would just put a good or a bad category check. And I noticed over time as the weeks increased, when I did maybe 10 calls a week or so, less than 1 in 10 calls had a negative response. But I had formed an opinion over time because those early calls had a less positive response. I was expecting that. But as I kept track of the data on my tally page, my tally sheet, I noticed that my resilience increased. I would make those calls with more confidence, more boldly. Didn't matter if they said they hated me or whatever else. I was just going to show up with the intent to serve. My leader had asked me to do that. Make the calls, and whatever the outcome is, doesn't matter. But I practiced that resilience through exposure. Well, something else we can do is to remind ourselves of our worth. Stick with me on this. Your value is not determined by someone else's opinion or their decision or their response to you. Your value is not determined by someone else's opinion or decision they make or their response to you. You can remind yourself of your worth by grounding yourself in truths from the Bible. In Psalm 139, what a beautiful psalm. Verse 14 says, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. That's not a statement of pride. That's a statement of thanking God for making us to be valuable creatures. He sees value in us. He made us. There's another passage in Ephesians 2:10 where it says we're God's handiwork. He made us, and he created us in Christ Jesus to do good works. We can remind ourselves of our worth. We can ask God to help us see that, to have other reminders throughout the day if we forget to remind ourselves. Because as we experience rejection, we might let that create a false interpretation of our value or our worth or our lack of value or worth. And so it's important to shore yourself up in this area so that you have the strength you need to live your life, to face the rejection that might be coming, because on the other side of that is where you want to be. And then finally, one other tip I have for you is to increase your goals a little bit. Maybe expand them to be a little bit bigger, a little bit scarier. This is not an invitation to burnout, but it's an invitation to assess the goals that you have. If they're safe, you might not be able to face the rejection that's necessary to develop you in your leadership. When your goals are big enough, rejection is going to become part of the process. It's going to become part of your experience rather than the end of the road. If someone's rejected and says, that's it, I'm done, they're not going to be able to achieve the goal. But if you can focus on the long-term vision and let the rejection that's probably ahead for you, friend, if you can let that rejection refine you and not define you, it's going to allow you to stay on that path over a long period of time to move in the direction that you want to go. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about staying motivated through rejection, because the fact is, even with the best mindset, even if you and I did those 5 tips I just shared with you really well, rejection can still sting. I'm not going to say that's not true. Rejection can really hurt a little bit or a lot. And I want to share with you some ways you can stay motivated, not because you're trying to get rejected all the time, but because you're developing resilience and allowing yourself to learn how to face it and move through it with grace. So, 4 tips to stay motivated. 1, surround yourself with support. You can find mentors, peers, a coach, or a community of people who remind you of your strengths and keep you grounded in truth. And they can also remind you of why you're choosing to face this rejection. You've got a dream in mind. They can support you in that. 2, another tip is you can celebrate small wins. Every step forward is progress. Don't forget that. Even if the ultimate goal feels very far away, every step forward is progress. We don't despise our small beginnings. We don't say, oh, I need bigger rejections to move forward. No, we just accept things as they come, and we recognize the progress that God is helping us make by celebrating our small wins. A 3rd tip to stay motivated through the experience of rejection is to keep that big picture in mind. Revisit your goal, or maybe more than one goal. Revisit your goals and the why behind them. Remember, one rejection does not cancel your calling. When I hear people say no to me, I like to think that I'm getting closer to what God has in mind for me. I'm getting closer to what God has shared with me that I could do. And it just means the rejection I've experienced is a person or an opportunity that's not going to be part of that journey. There's really no hard feelings if I allow myself to revisit my goals and my why. Why am I doing them? And then 4th, another tip for staying motivated through rejection is to just pray for guidance and peace. And when I say just pray, I don't mean that's the only thing you can do. I mean, that's a very powerful thing you can do. Sometimes it's the last thing we do. But let's start by asking God, help us see rejection through your eyes. As part of the process of shaping you and me, He is shaping us for something greater. He is shaping us to prepare us for what's ahead. So let's recap what we've covered today. This has been a big crash course in rejection. And I want you to remember that rejection is simply feedback. It's not a reflection of your value. I want to invite you to understand that your biggest fears about rejection and really being aware of what those fears are can help you address those fears, and also can help you diminish your experience of rejection. And it can help you take it less personally. It can help you recover more quickly when you understand your biggest fears. And then 3, think about the strategies that I shared with you, such as reframing rejection, building resilience, and reminding yourself of your true worth. That can help you move forward with confidence and not be derailed from the goal that you have in mind. So here's a call to action for you, okay? This week, I want you to identify one area in your life where the fear of rejection is holding you back. I'm inviting you to take a bold step in that direction, knowing that rejection isn't the end. It's just going to be part of your journey. If you're looking at a map of your whole life and you're taking a bold step in the direction you want to go, you might see a tiny little pinpoint, a little X mark on that map. That was rejection for you, but it's not the final destination. And there's so many beautiful things along the way of your journey. You just have to get through that part of your journey to keep moving forward. And remember, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. If no one's reminded you of this, it's true. And rejection does not define you. It refines you. I am grateful for most of the rejection that I've experienced because it doesn't define me. It refines me. Some of the rejection has helped me change course. Some of the reflection has humbled me and helped me draw closer to Christ. All of it has been helpful to some degree. So I want to thank you for joining me today. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs encouragement. Subscribe to this podcast and leave a 5-star review. Until next time, keep leading boldly and faithfully. You've got this.